Horror, action, zombies, and tank controls. Oh my. Welcome to MojoPlays. Today we're taking a look at the origins of what is arguably the greatest video game horror franchise of all time.
Resident Evil.
Before we begin, we publish new content all week long, so be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. Back in the early 90s, Capcom was well established as a trailblazer following hits like Street Fighter II and the Mega Man franchise. With the 3D era on the horizon, the publisher set its sights on redefining the horror scene. That's not to say ghoulish games had yet to be a thing. However, with the industry moving in 3D in the mid to late 90s, gaming was becoming more immersive than ever before. So who did Capcom single out as the visionary to guide this new project home? That person ended up being none other than Shinji Mikami. He cut his teeth on a slew of Disney video game adaptations. Prior to working on Resident Evil, the director had no experience handling horror games. Luckily, Takuro Fujiwara, who directed several of Capcom's early titles, handed the assignment to the inexperienced developer.
Let me take care of this.
Resident Evil, or Biohazard as it's known in its native Japan, was not created in a vacuum. According to Mikami, the initial plan was to modernize the 1989 Japan-only Famicom title Sweet Home for the 3D era. Created by Capcom and directed by Takuro Fujiwara, Sweet Home introduced various mechanics later expanded upon in Biohazard. Along with sharing a similar item management system, both games take place within a mansion, containing somewhat obtuse puzzles and reveal plot points through collectibles. One of Resident Evil 7's hidden VHS tapes even pays homage to Sweet Home's storyline.
It's locked. After you.
At the time, the horror genre was not exactly known for producing surefire commercial hits. Biohazard was regarded as just another project, and Mikami often worked alone during the initial concept forming stage. As development picked up steam, the team grew to approximately 80 people. Nobody, including Mikami, expected Biohazard/Resident Evil to become such a massive hit.
Thank you, Barry.
Yeah.
Mikami set out to foster a threatening atmosphere that forced users to play a proactive role during encounters. Zombies present an immediate physical danger that, for example, Japanese spirits lack. Similar to approximately 90% of modern zombie flicks, George Romero's Night of the Living Dead served as an inspiration. Although the Biohazard Resident Evil franchise comfortably ranks among Capcom's greatest earners, the original game was not designed to please a wide audience. In a comprehensive interview included in 1997's The True Story Behind Biohazard, Mikami compares Biohazard to beer, a strong drink loved by some, but definitely not for everyone.
Okay, let me handle this.
While a few things fell into place, Biohazard was still a long way from completion. In order to help shape the story and characters, designer Isao Oishi and writer Kenichi Iwao joined the development team. Two of Iwao's contributions consisted of changing the characters from cyborgs to normal humans and establishing the Umbrella Corporation as the central villain. Biohazard's cast of American heroes began to take shape, with developers settling on Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Rebecca Chambers, and Albert Wesker. Originally, the roster also included a comedic African-American named Dewey and a hulking behemoth called Gelzer, but both men failed to make the final cut.
Captain Wesker, where's Chris?
The initial idea was to produce a completely 3D version of Sweet Home, which meant opting for a first-person perspective. Doom and Wolfenstein had already taken the gaming industry by storm, and the camera angles seemed to promote the sense of fear desired by Mikami. A first-person prototype was produced featuring Japanese spirits instead of zombies, although very little information about this demo has been made public. Alas, the PlayStation's hardware constraints proved too steep of a hurdle to overcome, prompting the director to begrudgingly shift to a third-person view. Crafting detailed 3D environments was also beyond the console's capabilities. A solution arrived in the form of 1992's Alone in the Dark, a survival horror game pairing pre-rendered sets with 3D enemies and objects. With the environments consisting of terrifying but static images, Biohazard could allocate more resources to crafting detailed monsters. The fixed camera was also selected to help heighten the tension by limiting a player's perspective to a single area. On a slightly less positive note, Biohazard/Resident Evil's infamous tank controls are a byproduct of the shift to static angles and a third-person perspective. Biohazard/Resident Evil's iconic design and aesthetic can partly be credited to the technological constraints encountered during production. In 1995, Capcom unveiled previews of a prototype featuring cooperative gameplay, an element inspired by Sweet Home's 5 playable characters. While co-op would eventually be introduced in the 2003 online multiplayer spin-off, Resident Evil Outbreak, 1996 was a tad too soon for a 3D two-player adventure. Other dropped features included real-time weapon swapping and an early rendition of the Graveyard, though the latter was restored in the 2002 GameCube remake. Unlike Sweet Home, Biohazard targeted an international market. Capcom's North American division changed the title from Biohazard to Resident Evil due to a trademark issue with New York-based metal band going by Biohazard. They also ramped up the difficulty, so the campaign needed to be more than a quick rental to be completed. The most significant alteration was excluding the Japanese version's auto-aim function, which made it all the more likely for a zombie to trigger a panic attack in players. Originally, the game had both English and Japanese voice acting, however the team was disappointed by the awful acting put on by the Japanese actors. Ultimately, it was decided that due to the American setting, the studio elected to use only English voice acting for all versions. Little did they know that the English track wasn't that much better.
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
Following an exhausting development cycle, in 1996, Capcom published Resident Evil to critical acclaim and, surprisingly, commercial success. According to VG Charts, Capcom's experimental horror game is the 15th top-selling title on the PlayStation 1. Resident Evil was such a big hit that not only did development on a sequel commence instantly, but 2 releases of the first game in the form of a director's cut and a DualShock supported version. The franchise has continued to go from strength to strength, with the string of similar success stories with Resident Evils 2, 3, and Code Veronica. Capcom was on a roll. We got a film series! We don't like to speak of that series. Moving on. Between 1999 and 2004, Resident Evil 4 underwent a very troubled development period, with the game having gone through multiple project restarts, though one of the rejected premises ended up becoming Devil May Cry. Eventually, the game set on embracing a more action-oriented tone, but it still managed to preserve the series' trademark horror atmosphere while shifting the perspective to an over-the-shoulder angle, a decision that would eventually become the industry standard for all third-person shooters, as Resident Evil 4 was an astounding critical and commercial success. We have another video on that game's development history if you'd like to find out more. Shortly after Resident Evil 4's development concluded, however, Shinji Mikami left Capcom to help form the short-lived Clover Studio, though he left that company after only 2 years and would go on to join Platinum Games before forming his own studio in 2010 with Tango Gameworks, where he would produce The Evil Within and its sequel. Both of those games drew heavy inspiration from Resident Evil. After RE4's success, Capcom decided to double down on the action at the expense of the franchise's roots without Mikami. Considering 2009's Resident Evil 5 and 2012's Resident Evil 6 outsold the previous 4 entries, the publisher's plan worked, at least on a commercial level. However, success arrived at the cost of the license's reputation, with Resident Evil 6 proving to be especially divisive. Capcom UK's head of marketing, Dave Turner, would later go on to say that Resident Evil 6 action-heavy direction was intended to attract fans of Call of Duty, a statement that angered fans of the franchise's original horror direction, many of whom saw this as a betrayal of Mikami's original vision.
My name's Leon. I'm under the President's order to rescue you.
What? My father?
That's right. And I have to get you out of here. Now come with me.
Not all was lost for the series, however. In the same year as Resident Evil 6, Capcom also released Resident Evil Revelations on the Nintendo 3DS. This game opted to retain the claustrophobic maze-like horror corridors of the original Resident Evil titles, while also including the third-person, over-the-shoulder action of Resident Evil 4. That game received better critical reception than 6, and as a result, Capcom released an episodic-based sequel in 2015, though critical reception wasn't as strong as its predecessor.
Let the heavens scorch the earth with justice.
Raccoon City all over again.
It wouldn't be until 2017 that the mainline series would finally return to its horror roots. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard finally brought to life Mikami's original vision of an immersive first-person fright fest. That momentum of confined horror is still going thanks to the recent critical and commercial success of the incredible Resident Evil 2 remake. Even more exciting is that Resident Evil 8 has now officially entered development. The future of the series looks better than ever, and we can't wait to see what comes next.
Leon, what's gonna happen to us?
Don't worry. We got into this mess. We can get out of it.
Check out these other great clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.